Welcome everyone to Zoom into Books this afternoon. We have an exciting story to share with the children today. We have multi-international award-winning author Diana Pishner Walker with us. She is the author of 6 children's books. Her newest book just came out. The title is Hop and Trot, and she's going to be reading that for us later. Right now, we want to welcome Diana to Zoom into Books.
Hi, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's so nice to have you here. Diana's been on Zoom into Books with us a couple times over the last couple years. And to begin with, Diana, please tell the viewers a little about yourself and about the books that you currently have out. Okay. And then we'll go right on to Hop and Trot and let you share that with the kids.
Well, my books are children's books, and they are Italian-American themed, and they say to write what you know about. So that's what I know about being Italian and about my family stories. So that's what I've been sharing. I started sharing my stories with my first book, and it was called Spaghetti and Meatballs, Growing Up Italian. It's a true story about growing up not only as an Italian child, but growing up in the era that I did. And this book also contains recipes, and they're family recipes, so you know those were not easy to come by. So Spaghetti and Meatballs, Growing Up Italian. And in the front of my Spaghetti and Meatballs book and in the back, there are family pictures that my illustrator drew from to create the characters in the book. So that was my very first book. And then I came up with a trilogy, like there are 3 in a series, and they're called Hopping to America. The first one is Hopping to America, A Rabbit's Tale of Immigration. And this is about a little family of rabbits that immigrate from Italy to West Virginia. And in the back of each of my hardback books, there is an education page. This one happens to contain a glossary. So when I go into schools or speak to different children's groups, we can go over some of the Italian words that I use throughout the story, and they're learning a little bit of a different language. So after these little bunnies immigrate and get all settled into West Virginia, they celebrate their first holiday. And this is Hopping to America, A Rabbit's Tale of La Befana. La Befana is an Italian custom that's celebrated at Christmas. This book touches a little bit on the subject of bullying. There is a fox in this book that gives the little bunnies a hard time. You can see the beautiful illustrations. However, the grandmother, or Nana, in this book takes care of that old fox. And in the back of this book, the education page consists of Christmas customs and traditions in Italy. And I know it's not Christmas time, but I would love to share my favorite one of these. It's called Writing Letters to Father Christmas. It's a tradition for children in Italy. They also write letters to their parents, telling them how much they love them, and they decorate the envelopes. Sometimes they add string to them so they can be hung on the tree. Those letters to the parents are read aloud after that big lunch on Christmas Day, making the holiday a wonderful family affair. I think that's one of my favorite customs. So that's Hopping to America, A Rabbit's Tale of La Befana. And you'll notice that Santa has candy carrots in his hand for the bunnies. So these little bunnies, they're here, they're settled. They've been living with a cousin. They've been living with their cousin Dominic, and now they've moved into a home by themselves. And cousin Dominic is very lonely, and he invites his girlfriend from Italy to come to the United States and to get married. So this book is Hopping to America, A Rabbit's Tale of a Wedding. So the little bunnies all help with the wedding. And this book touches a little bit on adoption. There's a baby bunny that's found at the end of the story, and the bunny in the story, Dominic, has to decide what to do with baby bunny. Leave him in the woods where he found him, take him to the church. What should he do? So we talk a lot about becoming a family in this story. And in the back of this book, there's also customs about weddings in Italy. And I think in the story, throughout the story, when you read the story, you'll see many of those customs. When those 3 books were written, we decided that we needed a little extra something for teachers or for parents to work with their children about the stories. So there's an activity book that goes along with the 3 stories. And in this activity book, it has games and coloring sheets. There's a maze. There's a little passport. And even in the back, there are also a couple recipes too. And in the back, there's a little song. So these activity books complement the Hopping to America series. A couple years ago, came out, well, 2 years, I think, I wrote the book, The Christmas Feast, A Fishy Tale. And it's about 2 little guys who take a boat out when they're not supposed to, and they get in a lot of trouble because they run into a storm, and they're trying to actually save Christmas Eve in their town. And in the back of this one, there are also recipes. There are some fish recipes. So this is Christmas Feast, A Fishy Tale. That brings us to our new one. Hop and Trot.
Diana, tell the viewers what your inspiration is for Hop and Trot. It is a tale that they may have heard before in a different form, and I think that's what's so interesting about this. And share that with our viewers. And for those of you watching, thank you for joining us on Facebook. If you have questions for Diana, please type them into the viewer comments, and we'll make sure that she answers your questions at the end of her talk. And this video will also be on our YouTube channel in a few weeks. And if you haven't subscribed to the Zoom in the Books YouTube channel, please do. So Diana, give us the inspiration and then please read the story.
I was thinking about stories that I was going to be telling to my grandchildren and which stories I'd like them to learn. And I have 2 new grandbabies. One is here and one is coming very shortly. And so I've dedicated the book partly to them, to my 2 new granddaughters coming. And then I've also dedicated this book to my classmates from the class and school that I graduated from, my oldest and dearest friends. And when I was thinking about these different fairy tales and whatnot stories I wanted to teach my grandchildren, the story of the tortoise and the hare popped into my head. And I thought, it seems to me that most stories about the tortoise and the hare is when they were young and vibrant and they wanted to win this race and there was a lot of competition. And I thought, well, I wonder what would happen when the tortoise and the hare got older and how would they handle it then? You know, and not giving away my age, but I'm not in the young group anymore. So I kind of related it to some of my friends and came up with the tortoise and the hare retold a little bit Italianized. It's Mr. Tartaruga, who's Italian, and Mr. O'Hara is the bunny that won a race. And they bring their families into the picture this time in this race. They kind of have the same sentiments, but a little bit of a different outcome. And, you know, as we grow older, we are still young at heart, as my characters are, but things get a little more difficult to do. So I think I kind of stress the fact that they're not as young as they used to be, but they're still friends. So are we ready? Hop and Trot. On the shores of a very beautiful beach in the country of Italy lived a family of turtles, the Tartarugas, which means turtle in Italian, and their children and their children's children. Each day, the turtle family enjoyed the long, slow walks together on the beach. And we did something a little different this time to try to make this book a little more of an older feeling. The pictures are in black and white. There also lived not far from the beach in a wooded area a family of bunnies, the O'Haras. There were many, many bunnies in their family. One hot summer day, Mr. Tartaruga was taking his daily walk on the beach before all the human visitors began to arrive, when he heard Mr. O'Hara call to him from the shore, "Mr. Tartaruga, why don't we have a race today?" And if you remember the previous story, kind of started out the same way. Mr. O'Hara wanted to continually race. "No, Mr. O'Hara, same answer I give you every day," said Mr. Tartaruga. "We are too old to even think about such a thing." "Who are you calling old?" Mr. O'Hara asked. "I know I can still beat you." So the bunny still has kind of the same attitude he had many, many years ago. Let's see what happens. "Very well. I will race you tomorrow at sunrise," Mr. Tartaruga answered. "Yes, it's been way too long. The O'Hara family will all be here to cheer me on till win once more," shouted Mr. O'Hara. Mr. Tartaruga replied, "The Tartarugas will be here too." Apparently, Mr. O'Hara didn't remember how the first race ended. The next day, the morning sun was beginning to rise, and all one could see were the O'Hara bunnies for miles. It was such a large family. Mr. O'Hara's family. The turtles began to slowly line the shores. Here come the turtles. In the distance, on a post out in the water, stood Solly Seagull. He had volunteered to be at the finish line to judge the race. So that's a new character to the story. Solly's the judge. Not a bunny, not a rabbit. So it's a non-partial judge, right? Mr. Tartaruga watched as Mr. O'Hara opened a sun umbrella, carefully placed it in the sand. He opened a beach chair lined with a beach towel. He turned on his radio and sat down to make himself quite comfortable. Opening a picnic basket, he took out some carrots to snack on and began to sip on a cup of carrot juice. Mr. Tartaruga slowly shook his head in disbelief and thought to himself, "Some things never change." So there's Mr. O'Hara, a little overconfident, thinking he's going to run down there and beat the turtle at the race, right? Mr. O'Hara called to Mr. Tartaruga. As he pointed, "Mr. Tartaruga, you go ahead and start from there. The bunnies have drawn a line in the sand. Did you hear me? You can begin the race. I'll be along shortly. I'll see you at the finish line." "Are you going to do this again? Did you not learn your lesson from years ago?" Mr. Tartaruga asked. Mr. O'Hara laughed. "Go on. I'll see you when I pass you, down there by Solly." You notice the little turtle has his reading specs on too now. Mr. Tartaruga slowly began to trot down the beach. He turned several times, but Mr. O'Hara was still in his beach chair and had fallen asleep. So Mr. Tartaruga could easily win this race, right? All of the bunnies began to call to Mr. O'Hara to wake up and get moving as Mr. Tartaruga was nearing the finish line. But Mr. O'Hara did not hear so well anymore and didn't hear anything but the calming beach waves. There's Mr. O'Hara still in his chair, enjoying the beach and the waves and the sunshine, his snacks, his music. Mr. Tartaruga arrived at the finish line, and as he started to go across the line, drawn by more bunnies, he stopped and looked back once more. Mr. O'Hara's snoring is all he could hear. Finally, Mr. O'Hara woke up and saw Mr. Tartaruga waiting for him at the finish line. Still not sure who's going to win, right? He was surprised. Mr. Tartaruga had not crossed over to claim the championship once and for all. He hopped down to the finish line and looked slowly at Mr. Tartaruga as he said, "Why didn't you cross the line?" Mr. Tartaruga answered, "Mr. O'Hara, we were friends many years ago when we were in school. Our friends called us Hop and Trot. Do you remember? What has happened to our friendship over the years?" So Mr. Tartaruga has a special place in his heart for Mr. O'Hara, I think, because they've been friends for so long. They both began to smile, and they crossed the finish line together. Solly called out, "It's a tie." Hop and Trot were friends again for many, many years to come. The end. Now, in the back of this story, I added some questions, so you can kind of remember the story a little better. So I'm going to just go over a couple of those questions. Is that all right? It says, do you know the answer? I'm not going to give you the answers. You'll have to get the book to get the answers. What does Mr. Tartaruga mean in Italian? Where do the O'Hara bunnies live? When did Mr. Tartaruga take his daily walks and where did he walk? What did Mr. O'Hara and want Mr. Tartaruga to do? Who was the judge of that race? Why do you think Mr. O'Hara did not start the race the same time as Mr. Tartaruga? Why did Mr. O'Hara not hear the other bunnies? Why did Mr. Tartaruga not cross the finish line when he got there? Who won that race? Describe Mr. Tartaruga and Mr. O'Hara's friendship. And there's this. Think about your friendships with your friends today. Are any of your friends like Mr. Tartaruga? Or are any of your friends like Mr. O'Hara? Lots to think about. I hope you enjoyed that story.
Thank you, Diana. That's a terrific story.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be reminded of family and friendships, particularly during some of the tough times.
Exactly.
Excuse me. You have written 6 children's books, ranging from very interesting topics, immigration, to your Italian heritage with the Fishtail book and Hop and Trot. And I know there are a lot of new authors, first-time authors out there watching, and they're always interested in knowing, how do you get started? How do you get your ideas for your books? And now that you've been doing this for several years, what advice would you have for those just starting out?
If I were to just try to sit down and think of something to write about, it would never happen. All of my stories have a special meaning. They're family oriented, something that has happened in my family, or something that just kind of comes to me. For example, in the immigration book, both of my parents had passed away, and I found a little blurb on their Christmas, at the bottom of their Christmas card list. So my mom had written about a little bunny named Joby, and a couple sentences, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. My mom wanted to write this book, so I finished it for her. It's just different things kind of come to you, and I've always been told by many to write what you know about and write what you enjoy. And if it's not fun, then it's not something you should be writing about. I have a website, dianapishnerwalker.com, and on my website, it's at least once a week I get a question from someone who wants to become an author and they want to write, asking me for advice and how I got started. And I just kind of actually fell into it. I don't think I came by my my publisher the way most people come by publishers. And in the Spaghetti and Meatballs, the very first book that I did, there was a lady that in my hometown who encouraged me to write about growing up Italian. And at the time I worked in the school system, and I told her I can speak to children, I can teach children, but I don't know that I can come down on their level to write about stories that they would enjoy reading. So she encouraged me, and she said, just write, just tell your story about growing up. And I did. And then that's what kind of got the ball rolling for me.
That's true. And Diana's books have won Mom's Choice Awards, Next Generation Indie Book Awards, London Book Awards, Paris Book Awards. They have been highly lauded in the children's book industry. It's true, write what you know. And Diana started with nonfiction. And a lot of people think nonfiction is harder to write than fiction. Do you want to speak to that?
Nonfiction was very easy for me to write because it's exactly what happened to me when I grew up. The fiction, I did do, like the immigration book, I did do a little bit of research when I saw what my mom wanted to write about it, and wrote about immigration that really happened to people, the things that happened to people and my grandparents and great-grandparents when they came here. And I used little bits of those in the story. And this one is actually also being sold at Ellis Island and at the Statue of Liberty in their gift shops. You have another little bit of encouragement. You have to reach out. You never know who's going to say yes.
That's true. Well, we lost Diana there. There you are. Hello. Welcome back.
You froze for a little bit.
That's right. Yeah, writing the book is just the beginning of the journey, isn't it?
Exactly.
Once you write a book, you find a publisher, you finally get a book in your hand, a beautiful children's book. Then the next step is to get out there and talk to people about it. And Diana has traveled America with Headline Books. You've been to Boston at the National Education Association Conference and the American Library Association Conference in Washington. We've been in Orlando, New York City. She went to Book Expo America. So tell us about some of these adventures and how this changed your sales approach, or maybe what you have learned during this process of getting out and talking to people.
It's wonderful to be asked to attend different functions and to speak to people and tell them about your books. But I have a special place in my heart for those little off-the-wall things that come up, and I get to talk to people. One of my favorite places was when we went to Boston, and I got in touch with with IM Books, the owner of IM Books, which was the very first Italian-American bookstore in the United States. And I asked them, I said, I'm going to be in Boston. Can I come to your store and do a signing? Well, they went a little above that, and we did a speaking engagement there. So I got to talk to those people in Little Italy, which was my dream come true, and speak to them and sell our books there. And from there, they just kind of went all over. There's a lady in Italy that's a professor that uses the immigration book in her classroom. She works in a high school there, and just so happens a friend of mine was going on a trip to Italy and gave her one as a gift. And she got in touch with me and asked if she could teach with this book in her classroom. So that little book is now in San Giovanni, Italy, being taught to 16-year-olds. You just never know where it's coming from.
That's an amazing story. That's exactly right. And I've always told authors there's no such thing as a bad book signing or a bad event that you do, because you're always meeting people and you never know where your networking is going to start and end. And yours happened to end in Italy, which is amazing. I know some of the authors do virtual school visits around the world. We've had authors in Germany, Italy, England, and with technology, particularly what we have learned since the pandemic, that has been beneficial to you too, hasn't it?
Yes. Yes. I don't know what we would have been doing the last couple of years without the internet and Zoom and all the other devices that we use to share our stories. And it's not, to me, it's not selling books, it's sharing my story.
Exactly. You've got a story to tell and to share. And I know that you do a lot of events. Diana will be with us in Charleston, West Virginia at the West Virginia Book Festival in October, and she will be with us in Charlotte, North Carolina in November at the Southern Christmas Show. But you have an event coming up pretty soon. How about telling us about that now?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask. In the town that I grew up in, Clarksburg, West Virginia, there's a state festival, and the state festival is the West Virginia Italian Heritage Festival. And it's happened for many, many years. And this year, or last year it was canceled, and the year before it was canceled. This year they're finally going to try to do this in person. And my brother and I co-chair the West Virginia Italian Heritage Festival Authors Forum. So we get authors from all over the world to speak about their books at this forum. And they have to either have some Italian descent, or their material has to contain something about Italy or something about Italians. And this year it will be held on Saturday of Labor Day weekend at the Clarksburg Harrison Public Library at noon. We have 2 authors who are Zooming in from Alabama and from Boston. And there are 4 in-person authors that will also be speaking and selling their books.
That will be an exciting time, and I know it brings thousands of people, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very exciting. And you have a group of very talented students who have made plays out of your books. Is that right?
That's correct. Each of the Hopping to America series have been performed at the Vintage Theater Company in Clarksburg, West Virginia, and also at the Italian Heritage Festival on the children's stage. And they have been bunnies for 3 years. And I'm hoping that this year maybe we have another thing's kind of in the works. The Fishy Tales book, maybe I'm hoping able to be performed at the Feast of the Seven Fishes here in my town of Fairmont, West Virginia. And that's the second weekend in December. So we're kind of have that in the making too.
That's so exciting. And people don't realize that it can be very easy to pull a play out of a children's book. And it's a great way to get children involved, particularly improve reading skills and become socially aware of the subjects of the books that they're performing. I think it's a wonderful thing. A lot of the authors do readers theater when they do school visits too, and that encourages a lot of participation. So I know that you do school visits. Would you like to tell the viewers how to get in touch with you and what your workshops are about when you go to schools?
With the children, when I go to schools for the children, you can reach me through dianapishnerwalker.com, through my website. It's probably the best way. And when I go to schools, I read the stories. I let the teachers have a little input as I show them my website as to what books they'd like or what subject material they'd like me to cover. And then afterwards, we do some little exercises. And like with the activity book, some of the teachers will purchase those ahead of time for the students in their class. And when I'm finished reading one of the Hopping to America books, they go right into letting them work together with me and the teacher with their activity book. So that's a good way to kind of back up the story, and hopefully they remember a little bit more that way.
That's great. Plus, it's very fun for the kids too.
There's something about children, when you tell them you're an author, and they get big eyes because it's a really big deal to them. And then if you sign your name in that book, it just means the world to them.
It's very special. So for those of you who are watching, if you'd like to get in touch with Diana Walker, her website is dianapishnerwalker.com. And all those links are posted in the Facebook feed in the comments section. And they will also be with the YouTube video when this is released on Zoom in the Books YouTube. So Diana, good luck at the Italian Book Festival, or the Italian Festival, and don't eat too many pepperoni rolls.
Never.
Thank you very much for joining us on Zoom into Books, and we'll have you back real soon.
Thank you. Ciao.
Thank you, everybody.